Okay, thank you for watching my video on the Delphi technique. And what I've done with this video is I've put together 3 different videos, which were the best short videos that I could find that show you the Delphi technique in action so that you can recognize it. They also break down a little bit about what you can do about it, but I would really encourage you, after you watch these, if you're interested in finding out more about how to stop the Delphi technique or what to do to shut it down when it's being used, is to check out Rosa Koire and just look on YouTube and type in Rosa Koire or Agenda 21 and you'll find Rosa Koire, and she has some great videos about the Delphi technique, and she gives you lots of ideas of how to shut it down and what to do about it. Now, it's really important for everyone to know about this because this is used in so many different areas to push agendas whenever there's an outside organization that wants to accomplish something in your community or your region, and it's not necessarily what the people there would want. Then the Delphi technique is used in order to create the illusion that there is some kind of local input or local local buy-in, that this is what the people in the area want. Everyone participated in these meetings, and this is the outcome, when in fact the outcome is simply predetermined, and you being there is just for show. Okay, and real quick, I'd like to just let you know my own experience with the Delphi technique, because I did participate in some meetings a few years ago where the Delphi technique was used, and at the time I did not know what that was. I didn't know what the Delphi technique was, although I did have a feeling that that there was something wrong at the meetings, that we were being asked to participate, but it really didn't seem to make much difference what one person in the meeting wanted, or if they wanted to add to the meeting. In the end, it didn't seem like it made a difference, and I just had a bad feeling about it. And it wasn't till some months later that I had listened to an interview with Rosa Koire where she touched on the Delphi technique, and she mentioned that she has some other videos that talk about it. She was actually talking about Agenda 21 in the interview, and she mentioned the Delphi technique, and so I did a little bit of research, and it immediately clicked that, yeah, this is exactly what happened in the meeting that that I participated in. And the meetings I participated in, they were a little bit different than the meetings you're going to see in these 3 videos. There's some variation on the technique used, and and I think there were reasons for that. And so I'll give you just a brief rundown of a description of what had happened to me in my own experience. Okay, the company that I work for is a contractor that contracts to another nonprofit agency that is an agency that is funded by the state of California. You see, the state of California is prohibited from performing certain functions by law. So what happens, at least in this area, is they set up nonprofits, and they fund those nonprofits, and then those nonprofits carry out the functions that the state is not allowed to do. And then those nonprofits also contract with other private contractors, for-profit contractors, to perform functions that they can't do. So what this means is that the nonprofit itself acts and functions like a government agency, state agency, although it's technically just a nonprofit. So what was going on at the time is the state of California was having budget problems. They were cutting back. There were going to be changes in the way that contractors were paid, and as well as some other changes administratively that we would have to make. And so what they did is they put together a series of meetings and asked contractors to participate. And they created the feeling, or basically acted as if we were all participating in the changes that were going to occur, that we were having input in shaping how this was going to turn out. And we all had a vested interest in making sure that it turned out well, because this was our livelihood. So what we would do is we would have a meeting I believe it was every 2, maybe 3 months. And this went on for a year to a year and a half. Now, at these meetings, they would present certain items for discussion, certain agenda items, and we would go down the list and talk about each one. Now, as we went down the list, sometimes a contractor that was present would become upset or have objections to a certain thing that was on the list. And so what they would do is they would write down on a flip chart what our objections were, or what input we had on that subject. They also would pass out flyers, and we would fill out questions or answer questions. And what they would do with those is that sometimes afterwards we would go through and discuss those things, and we would talk about our answers to the questions. Other times we just turned them in. Okay? But what they would do with the flip charts is at the end of every meeting, they would write down what we wanted to have on the agenda for next meeting. Okay? So this is a little bit different than what you'll see in some of the other videos of people using the Delphi technique. They'll very rarely write down on a flip chart agenda items that you want brought up at the next meeting. They'll usually tell you to write it down on a piece of paper and turn it in. Then they'll have the next meeting, and there will be no discussion of any objections that anybody had. Okay, so this was being done a little bit differently. Okay, so when we would have the next meeting, we would come back, and the first thing we would do is go through the list of items that were put forth for discussion at the previous meeting. So we would go through those items. Some of them we would discuss in great detail. We would thoroughly go through them. Okay, then we would come to the next items that were always brought forth on the agenda by the people putting on the meeting. Okay, so then they would bring up their items for discussion. So then the same thing would happen. People would have objections or want to add something, and then those things at the end of the meeting would be written down to be discussed at the next meeting. Okay? Now, these meetings went on for such a long period of time that it was really common for a contractor to be at one meeting and not be able to make the next meeting, or to be at 2 meetings and maybe not the third or the fourth. Because, like I said, this went on for over a year, about a year and a half. Okay, I was probably one of the only people that attended almost every meeting. I only missed one meeting. And there was almost a completely different group of people at each meeting. So what would happen is, people would go to one meeting. Maybe one contractor would become really upset with things that they were discussing about changing. That person might get so upset that they didn't come back the next meeting. Or sometimes they did come back to the next meeting. They would again discuss their objections, which would, like I said, be thoroughly discussed. And then we would move on to the agenda items that they already had written down for us to discuss at that meeting. Okay, so what was going on is they're making you think that you're having input because your objections are being written down, they're being discussed about, they're being talked about. Then the next meeting comes and you move on to the next agenda items. Now, because I attended all the meetings and the final meeting, I got to see everything as it progressed. And at the final meeting, I was left with the feeling that the outcome that they had at that meeting for all of us had nothing to do with any objection or anything that any contractor had brought up to be put on the agenda. I was left with the distinct feeling that it had been predetermined from the very beginning, that they could have just told us that at the beginning. We could have had one meeting where they say, these are the changes we have to implement. We're having budget problems, and I'm sorry, but we have no choice. We have to do these things. And, we would have had to deal with that. The reason I think they didn't do that is because the one thing that they're afraid of is everyone getting upset about something at the same time. Okay? When they tell you, this is what we're going to do, and they lay it all out, they're running the risk of everybody becoming angry, and when everyone's angry at the same time, they can get together and work together and make sure those things don't happen. Now, we as contractors had few options, but the one thing that could have happened if we all became upset enough is we could have worked together and forced a renegotiation of contracts. Now, that could be kind of dangerous. It might not have worked out in our favor, but when people's livelihoods are at stake, sometimes they'll all get together and do those kinds of things. So I think that is really what they were trying to prevent. They probably also didn't want us calling our state representatives and demanding something happened, and then some kind of new legislation gets proposed that might change everything. We have, as contractors, we have a lot of employees, and so a lot of people depend on those incomes, and those are all voting people, and they can contact their state reps, and so you're opening up a big can of worms if you get enough people mad at one time. So that, I think, is the real reason for using this Delphi technique in the situation that I'm talking about, and it's probably the reason in most of these situations that it is employed, because there's a certain outcome that these people want. That outcome is not necessarily what the people living in that community or that area want to happen. If it was something they wanted to happen, they would be at their city council demanding that actions be taken towards these ends, and that's not happening. So obviously that it's not something that the people want. So what they can't do is come out and tell you what their end goal is. So they have to have these meetings. They have to pretend like people are participating, that they're having input, that that the community's buying into what they want to do, so that at the end of the meetings they can say that everyone who has a stake in the outcome got to participate, and this is what they want. And we all know that that's a lie. That's not true. And what the Delphi technique does is just take a predetermined set of goals and tries to trick everyone into thinking that those goals came about because of something they participated in, when in fact their participation had no impact at all on any of the outcomes. So anyway, it's just really important that we all recognize the Delphi technique, that we all learn how to fight it, so that in our own communities, when we go to meetings about things that are affecting us and affecting our community, we can recognize it and we can do something to stop it. So I hope you enjoy these videos, and again, look up Rosa Corey and learn from her information. Thank you.
Forced to build multiple family dwellings and they're losing money on those properties. So my question is very simple. Is there anything anywhere in the plan that looks at the impact upon businesses and jobs in the state without mandating all those requirements? Do you have that is that part of the plan or not?
Aaron, do you want to take a minute to...
So your question is, in what part of the plan we're addressing the needs of businesses?
I'm saying you can say something that's nice and friendly and environmental, but if it destroys jobs, businesses are fleeing the state. It's the most hostile
We're
state.
going nowhere if we don't have an economy, if we don't have employment, if we don't have businesses.
Of course.
The strategy here is to bring the pieces together and try to identify comprehensive development. We cannot just focus on housing, we cannot just focus on schools. We need to focus on the different elements that make up the place and create the lifestyle, the economy, and the quality of a region that we want. And that's what this process is trying to get to.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting...
I will be happy to continue the conversation. I don't want to derail the path, because I think we're getting to some of those. Your questions will be addressed in the next exercise.
Okay, so can I ask the group, I'm going to do a timeout. I have a daughter that just turned 5 and we're still doing timeouts. Maybe when she gets to 6 we won't have to do timeouts anymore. So timeout group, there are questions. We can continue to pause and respond to those, or we can move along, because we do have some really interesting things that we want to show you, and we want to make sure you have a chance to talk. How many of you would like us to move along? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, we're going to move along. Okay.
Technique that's used to gain consensus, basically to give the illusion of public support for anything. And because they have to get public to buy into all this stuff, you know, they have to pretend that everybody wants it. You're the only one that doesn't want this. You're the one that's crazy.
You're weird.
Right. So when they have meetings, you know, and they have a lot of them, public workshops, visioning, whatever, on any number of topics, they've already got the conclusion. They already know what they want. You know, they want stack and pack housing, mass transit. They just want you to think that's what you want. And so they get a bunch of people, and they usually have shills in the rooms with you, facilitators. They have, you know, of course, activists that are there. They have the developers that are there. They have all the people that are going to, you know, of course, benefit by all of this.
Sure.
And they're all there, and they're all voting. So, you know, it's stacked against you. If you speak out, you are ridiculed, you are marginalized, you are, you know, again, in real life, we're being Delphi'd every day in California. It's called political correctness, and it's called shut them up. It's all about shutting you down. It's all about calling you a racist. It's all about calling you whatever, you know. Intolerant. You're intolerant because you don't want your 5-year-old to learn about, you know, someone's lifestyle, which, you know, I don't care what people do. I just don't want my 5-year-old to have to deal with that at 5. You know what I mean? Right. They should be learning to read and write. You know, I can help fill in the blanks and stuff like that later on. But it's all part of that bigger agenda. And the way they try to shut us down. And they've done a very good job of that in California for a long time. I mean, conservatives wouldn't even conservative. You know? Yeah. I mean, it got to the point where you couldn't talk about politics. They don't want us talking about politics. They don't want us talking about anything that actually means something. Right. Because then we might figure out what's going on. Yeah. So, you know, one of the reasons they've been able to steamroll us is by using this technique. And so, you know, but it's gotten to the point where I'm not going to be silent anymore. You know, good. Again, rip the Band-Aid off. Start talking about it. If somebody doesn't want to talk about it, too bad. You know what? They don't have to talk about it. They don't want to listen to it, too bad. To reverse the Delphi technique is what I do. Okay? What are you, racist? And then laugh. You know, because it really is a stupid thing. You know, how many times can you play the racist card? It doesn't mean it's just so ridiculous now. Do not buy into it. Do not feel bad. You know, I don't care if you're Catholic and raised on guilt. That's how I was. Get over it. Sure. You know, we are trying to save our country here for our kids. Right. And we need to speak up and speak out and do it often.
So if you're considered rude, too bad.
Well, you know what? Yeah, but, you know, be assertive. It's called being assertive. Yeah. See, they want to tell you it's rude because you're not saying what they want to hear. So when you speak up, and, you know, I went to one of their meetings and said, excuse me, you know, can you define open space? Because they said, well, you know, one of their questions was that in the Delphi technique, they wanted us to rank, you know, what our values were, how we felt about conserving open space. Is that important to us or not important to us? And I said, excuse me, what do you mean by open space? Is that government space? Is that, what is that? You know, oh, well, it's whatever you want it to be. It's any space that is not developed, currently developed. And I said, well, that open space is somebody's private property. You know, it's not just open space. I mean, if you're talking about somebody's government property, then that's fine. Do whatever you want with it. Conserve it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm all for that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But when you're talking about telling someone they can't build on their private property because we don't think they should, because it should be open to everybody, we don't have a right to do that. And so they tried to shut me down. And they tried to, one person told me I was a racist. And so, but the point is that, you know what, it's like, listen, you know what, one of the things that distinguishes America from other countries is the fact that we do own private property.
That's right.
That we can accumulate wealth.
Yeah.
That we can, you know, that was one of the things that we could do. Other countries, they don't buy property. They have to rent it. They lease it from the government.
Right.
It's not their property. So, you know, for us to just say, yeah, we don't want that guy to build on his ridge line, you know, that he owns. That's wrong. We should not be saying that. So you need to really think about that. But you need to speak out. You need to speak out for your neighbors. You need to protect your neighbor's private property as if it were your own.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, when they come for your property, nobody's going to protect
That's
you.
right. That's right. Now is our window of opportunity.
Which is why I went to the supervisors meeting and spoke out for the people of El Sobrante who
Right.
didn't know what was happening to them. They don't know.
Yeah.
And, you know, so for those of us that are awake, we need to double our efforts. You know, we need to double our efforts. We need to speak out, and we need to speak out often. And the thing, they fear that. Oh my gosh, you know, they haven't been challenged, especially in California, for so long, that it's amazing how good it feels to stand up for yourself. And it's not being rude. It is not being rude. What they are doing is rude. What they are doing
That's
is
right.
wrong.
Suppressing truth.
And that is exactly what we need to do. We need to say, you know what, I am right, and I'm going to speak out about it, and what they are doing is wrong. And when you start pointing it out, pointing the finger back at them, they start running. And
That's great.
Yeah.
Great.
And they don't, they're not as tough as they think. When you start actually standing up and using your voice, and it doesn't have to be screaming, it doesn't have to be that, it just has to be assertive, then they actually back down.
It's typical of a bully.
It totally is.
They're all blustery and mean, and
That's right.
And
when you get in their face and you actually call them on it,
yeah,
they back down.
yeah.
And that's what
good.
we have here, is we have someone who's been allowed to bully us as a community,
Yeah.
as a Californians, who's been able to bully us because we wanted to go along to get along, and we didn't want to make waves. Well, too late and too bad, because you know what? This is what we got, and we're guilty of that. But we have a voice now, and we need to use it. And you know, however that is for you, if that's writing a letter, if that's whatever it is, editorials, you know, get your thoughts down on paper. If you don't want to speak about it, get your thoughts down on paper, send it into your local magazine. You'd be surprised at how many people read this stuff online, you know, and don't know about it. They don't know what's really happening. They know something's wrong, they feel the same way, they just don't have a name for it. You know, there's people that own property, and that liberals, Democrats, whatever, you know, there's people that are losing their property and they don't know why. And so it's an issue we could all get behind.